Hey trainers, welcome to what I'm calling PokéWatch, a video series that keeps track of the mainline series of Pokemon games and games like them, while also providing some takes as hot as an oddish getting roasted by a flamethrower. You may have watched the first episode of my other video series, JRPG Watch, and are thinking, isn't Pokemon a JRPG? And yes, you'd be right, but as someone who owes his entire freelance writing career to Pokemon, I have way too much to say about catching them all for a man in his 30s, and don't want those videos diluted with Barraskewdas and Blacephalons. Much like JRPG Watch, PokéWatch will be split into two parts, a question I dive into and then general news and review roundups. So here's a question for you. Did Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee get too much hate? After all, with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, Game Freak released the video game equivalent of Trubbish for the first ever mainline Pokemon game on consoles, dumbing down the tried and true formula by shoving the Pokemon Go trend into the 17th Kanto revisit. Who exactly asked for this? Is what I and many other Pokemon veterans might have said back in 2018. While I understood then that Let's Go Eevee were for a new, younger generation of Pokemon fans that got caught up in the Pokemon Go frenzy, we were just coming off Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which were loaded with excessive tutorials and dialogue, and eagerly anticipating the first ever Pokemon game on a console. Many people huffed so much of Coughing's gas that they thought we'd get something as innovative as Breath of the Wild. I never got that high on hype, but I admit that as a fan with one foot in the grave that has played Pokemon for 25 years, the Let's Go Pikachu reveal left me sorely disappointed. I mean, it didn't even have online competitive play. As such, they were the first major Pokemon releases I didn't pick up on launch. The used game market in Japan is amazing, no GameStop ripping you off here, so I picked it up a couple months later for half off. Played up to about Celadon City, and when it didn't scratch that itch, I put it down, convinced that my initial opinion was correct. Until this summer, 5 years later. I was hankering for a Pokemon experience, and I remembered that I never played all of Let's Go Pikachu, picking it back up from the beginning to play on my trip to visit family in Canada. And now I say this unironically, Let's Go Pikachu is the second best Pokemon game on the Nintendo Switch, coming in behind Pokemon Legends Arceus. Without the fresh disappointment of its reveal marring my expectations, I couldn't put it down for my entire trip. You might have noticed two games I've singled out here by claiming Let's Go Pikachu is second best, Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet. While I ultimately did enjoy playing through Sword, going on to make a living dex and playing tons of ranked battles, it had an embarrassingly nonsensical story starring Chairman Rose and the Darkest Day, along with far too few innovations for the first real Pokemon game on consoles. Scarlet and Violet, on the other hand, run about as well as a one-legged slowpoke trudging through a vast but incredibly bland open world. While many, myself included, lamented the Pokemon Go style catching mechanics at first, I'm finding alternate ways to catch them all as refreshing as a soda pop from the Celadon department store as I continue my adventure through Kanto. After all, I caught a lot of Pokemon the traditional way for nearly 3 decades, so it's become rather tedious. Legends Arceus did well here too, making catching Pokemon more dynamic. It maintained the old style for more aggressive Pokemon while relying on stealth and surprise for the weaker or skittish, completely nixing the need to trigger battles most of the time. Imagine my disappointment when Scarlet and Violet ditched the little bit of innovation Let's Go and Legends brought, instead wimping out like a Wimpod in favor of the status quo. Would I want future Pokemon games to fully adopt the simplified Pokemon Go style permanently? No, but I would definitely prefer a more dynamic catching system because as it stands, I'd rather flick my wrist around than open my bag, scroll to a quick ball, run away if it fails, re-trigger the battle, and then throw a quick ball again before Nebby stays in the damn ball. As such, I do think that Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee got more hate than they deserved, from one part of the Pokemon fandom in particular. They were, after all, critically well received, and I'm sure parents who grew up playing Pokemon loved revisiting Kanto with their kids. I think they were simply released at the wrong time, sandwiched between Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon and Sword and Shield. A more kid-friendly title without any new Pokemon or competitive matchmaking couldn't satiate the Snorlax-level hunger of the Pokemon veterans like myself. If Game Freak suddenly dropped Let's Go Johto, I believe even the most disgruntled of fans would appreciate a nostalgic, casual romp with a few interesting twists on classic mechanics given how far away we are from playing Pokemon Legends ZA. Somehow the Let's Go games are like the best looking Pokemon games too. Who could have seen that coming? Sure, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee aren't all sunshine and shiny Pokemon. They're incredibly easy to the point where I have to handicap myself to get any real enjoyment out of the adventure. But this is true of every Pokemon game since Black and White and their sequels. I'm doing a pseudo Nuzlocke run, which for those that don't know simply means that if any Pokemon faints, they're considered dead and can no longer be used. To make things a little easier, I'm allowed to use revives found or gifted to me. I call this a Nuzlite. Furthermore, I'm limiting myself to using the same amount of Pokemon as the next gym leader while not exceeding the level of their strongest Pokemon, but I'll save a deeper discussion about difficulty for a future PokéWatch. I also don't use the stat boosting candies, and I'm definitely avoiding the hilariously named but egregiously overpowered Pikachu exclusive moves like Pika-Papow and Zippy Zap. This has led to some pretty intense battles that harken back to the first time I faced Agatha of the Elite Four when I was 9 years old or got spooked by that surprise Cynthia battle in Pokemon Black. Though Gamer Rich and Gamer Stan here using Horn Drill to one-shot my Pikachu and then one-shot my Nidoking was totally not cool. All said, combine that initial disappointment dissipating with the disappointment I still feel for the games that came after, and mix well with some self-induced challenge, and I truly do think many like myself were far too hard on Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. I unironically now hope we get a sequel in a similar style, though maybe without moves like Splishy Splash and Floaty Fall. But what about you? What did you think of Let's Go Pikachu when they were first announced? And do you have a better or worse opinion of them 5 years later? Comment below and I'll do my best to respond. So I have one more question for you before we move on to the news. Who's that Pokemon? It's my dog, Zelda Chew. And she's here to remind you to like and subscribe, please and thank you. Anyway, what's going on in the world of Pokemon games? The truth is that there's not much going on since the reveal of Pokemon Legends ZA last February. After consulting the fortune teller in Celadon City, she confirmed that we'll see a black and white remake and Generation 10 someday. Bold prediction. For the longest time, we had a Pokemon Presents every August, but we're going to have to wait a little while longer to see what kind of fit Utsunomiya wears. I do think the Pokemon Company is waiting for the full announcement of the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro HD Turbo during the next Nintendo Direct to show us more. And it's quite difficult to speculate on when that'll happen, and neither could the Celadon fortune teller. Sometime this October or November, I hope. Though I've seen some rumors floating around that we might see a Nintendo Direct this September, but none of the rumors are substantiated, so. In other news, Pokemon TCG Pocket is coming out in late October, and I will be reviewing it for Nintendo Life, so have an eye for that. In regards to other creature collectors, there was some buzz going around that developer Pocket Pair was debating shifting Palworld into a live service game. This came from an interview done with the Pocket Pair CEO over at ASCII Japan and later translated by Automation. Given our collective gamer rage for live service titles, Pocket Pair took to Elon Musk's vanity project to debunk these claims, stating that while they discussed it internally, Palworld was designed to be buy to play, and that, most importantly, players don't want a live service game. Say what you will about Palworld's Pokemon influences, but Pocket Pair has proven time and again that they have their consumers' best interests in mind. I myself enjoyed Palworld for a little bit and look forward to dabbling once again whenever it leaves early access. And that's all I have for the first ever PokéWatch. Right now, I do not know how frequent this video series will be as there isn't a lot of Pokemon news to go around. However, as we get closer to the release of another Pokemon game, you'll see PokéWatch popping up as often as a Zubat in Mount Moon.